feels too late for Andrew, really, doesn't it? I mean, he's had so many opportunities over the last 15, 20. I keep going back thinking, was it 2001 was the allegation, or when he was meant to have been with Virginia. This is a long period of time, and he's had many, many opportunities. I think they are definitely running out. The concern that I have is what he has said to the royal family in the past. He must have had conversations with the king. He must have, they must have asked him years ago, what is this all about, Andrew? Who is this Virginia? Who is this Jeffrey Epstein? He must have had conversations with his family. Was he being truthful the whole time? Is he sticking to his story the whole time? Would he change his story? I don't know what he can do. I would hate to advise him because he's made so many errors in the past. I think he just needs to avoid scandal because we've got a king working hard, Prince William working hard, and we need him to stop dropping the ball if the royal family is going to succeed. Well, I've been discussing this week because privately here in Vatican City, we've had a lot of conversations about this, as you imagine. We don't quite know what the king thinks. This is the problem. We know what the palace think. We know what Andrew thinks because we had statements, we've had kind of, behind the scenes kind of, conversations. But the king hasn't actually actively come out and said anything. I think it would be very difficult for Charles. I think it is proving very difficult for Charles to act on his brother. I think that he doesn't like confrontation. I think it's rather telling that it was a phone call rather than the late Queen when she removed all the titles from Prince Andrew. She actually summoned him for a face-to-face meeting at Windsor Castle. So I think the King actually finds it incredibly difficult. We'll talk about it a little bit later, maybe. We're in the Vatican City for a huge, huge event for the King, really, really important for the King and for the Church of England and the Catholic Church. And yet he's having to deal with his brother. It's always the family issues, I find, that really, really bring the royal family down. It's always the kind of interaction between brothers, between husbands and wives, that really cause a problem. And I genuinely think that the King would much rather just do his job, do his duty, be a king, than rather have to sit down and have to sort out his brother's house, sort out his brother's titles. I actually think that he shouldn't have to. It should be up to Andrew to sort out his house and Andrew to sort out his title. So I feel very sorry for the King that he's in this position.
Well, one thing that has already happened is that I believe Andrew's coat of arms banner has been taken down at Windsor Castle. Matt, you reported on this. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so this is another thing that Andrew gave up. He gave up the being a Knight of the Garter. And look, this is the most chivalric order in the UK. It goes back to the Knights of the Round Table in King Arthur. And I think in 2006, he was given a member of the order. He hasn't appeared at this event every June since 2019. It's quite a fascinating thing to see. Actually, you see all the royals, all these people that have been in the order walking down to St George's Chapel, and it's a really great day. As I say, it's therefore the highest chivalric order, and there have been calls for him to be stripped, but he gave up his knighthood. And then this week we got a picture of his banner, which is a huge glamorous flag and a little coronet next to Prince William's. It's been up there, but it got removed this week, and we published today saying that it's another humiliation for Andrew that it's actually been removed. The interesting thing here is that you would normally need a king's warrant, or you would normally need to be guilty of high treason for this to be removed, but it's just been quietly, not so quietly, but it's been taken down without any of these kind of actions because they just thought it was a little bit inappropriate for his order to be hanging there.
And Arthur, you've been covering royal stories for a very long time. Do you think that we're going to see Prince Andrew at either public or even just family royal events in the future?
I don't think we will, no. I think we may see him at family events at Christmas time, of course, when all families should be together. And obviously, he's the king's brother and the king cares about him. I mean, he must. But, Jack going on about Andrew's never done his duty. You forget he served in this country. He served in the war, in Falklands War. He risked his life for this country. And I was at Portsmouth when he came back. And crowds were huge and he was a hero. So he did his duty. And I went on many tours with him.
Important before we go on, of course, to mention that Prince Andrew has always firmly denied any wrongdoing and all of the allegations against him. But Jack, this bombshell statement from Andrew last week, did it come at the right time? Was it enough?
I think the palace clearly had some idea that things were going to ramp up in terms of the scandal around Prince Andrew. Obviously, they'd have known that Virginia's book was coming. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they had an inkling that there was going to be some more material in the Sunday papers. Obviously, we'd already had some huge bombshell emails, including showing that Andrew had been emailing with Epstein, Sarah Ferguson too. So they clearly knew that more was coming and something needed to be done. So it was definitely a good idea to do something. But the reason why they did not actually manage to head off the crisis at all, really, is I think the framing in that statement from Prince Andrew was all wrong for the moment. So he voluntarily gave up the use of his titles, which always ran the risk of being seen as purely symbolic and meaningless in reality, because obviously he retains those titles. But what added to that is the explanation given was that he was doing it to avoid being a distraction to the good work of the monarchy, and that he has always done his duty. And that is absolutely not how the public see this. The public do not see Andrew as a man who's always done his duty, and they don't see this as about distracting from the monarchy. They see this as being about a woman who is no longer with us, Virginia, who is getting an opportunity to tell her story about 6 odd months after her death. And whose allegations have never properly been tested in court. And what the public wanted to see from Andrew was contrition, was some understanding of the fact that his friendship with Epstein was morally wrong. We now know that he continued contact with Epstein after the point he told Emily Maitlis, that he had flown all the way to New York specifically to break off that friendship. And he even went as far as telling Emily Maitlis in 2019 in his car crash Newsnight interview, I had no contact with Epstein after that point. So it was unambiguous. There was no wriggle room, there was no vagueness. He said he had no contact, and we now know that in February 2011, he sent Epstein an email saying, I'm more worried about how this is affecting you. Don't worry about me. I'm more worried about you. We're in this together. We'll have to rise above it, and we'll play again soon. And that email came the day after Virginia's first big newspaper interview, which ran over 3,600 words. And in it, she described how she was sexually abused as a child by a friend of the family, she said at that time. And she had to live homeless from age 11. She had sex with men not for money at that time, but for food. And that she was then abused by Giuffre Epstein and had to take Xanax to numb the pain. And Andrew, that was the first publication of the photo of Andrew with his arm around her waist. And Andrew came off the back of that email, of that story, and sent Epstein this email saying, I'm more worried about you.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in Virginia's book, it makes for really harrowing reading, all those details in there. To broaden out the story for one moment and moving off Andrew just briefly, of course we know now that Sarah Ferguson, his ex-wife, is also going to give up the use of her Duchess of York title. But Matt, I'm curious, how do Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie fit in with all of this? What will happen with them? What do we know about their role in all of this?
Well, Jack was just talking there about removing the titles. And the problem was that the palace were faced if they wanted to take some kind of action against Prince Andrew. It was a febrile atmosphere, to be quite frank, after those emails, and they knew they had to do something. But by actually officially removing the Duke of York titles, it had repercussions on the girls. And the feeling, I understand, is that they didn't particularly want to punish Beatrice and Eugenie for sins of their father. So by asking Sarah and Andrew to give up their titles, and not use them, then it didn't have implications on them, which I think is kind of fair. They're not to blame in everything that's happened here, but they are inextricably linked. And we have seen Beatrice go into the house. She's come out. She looked quite stressed, to be quite frank, in the photo that we've seen. We know they are a unit. I think Sarah's called them the quad or the squad. They're a group of 4, and they're very, very close. And it does. And although I do feel a lot of sympathy for Beatrice and Eugenie, you've got to remember, when we look at that lease, you might talk about it a little bit later, but I got hold of the lease this week and I've read it. They get Royal Lodge if Andrew was to pass, or if he was to pass it on. Okay, it's the children that, and his widow, he doesn't have a widow, but it goes to the children. So they are inextricably linked to Beatrice and Eugenie, and I have an awful lot of sympathy for them. But as this family 4 unit, they've got to be involved in all the repercussions that are heading towards Andrew.